When my world imploded, Julian offered a faint, condescending smirk and told me that failure was simply part of my genetic makeup. I never brought up the small fortune I'd secured by selling a discreet patent for $98 million. So when he walked out for a younger model, I let him believe he was taking everything. Months later, when the facts finally came to light, the look on his face and his lawyers was one of pure, dumbfounded shock. Some people just aren't built for it, Amelia. Julian uttered those words about 3 months before he would ultimately leave me for Clara. I remember that specific morning vividly because it was the first instance he'd articulated what I'd long suspected he felt. I was in the middle of reviewing the quarterly data from my analytics department at Biogen Corp when I casually mentioned another funding cut. His reply was immediate and dismissive, spoken between sips of the French press coffee I had prepared for him at precisely 7 a.m., exactly as he preferred it. Our high-rise condo kitchen had become the backdrop for this daily, joyless ritual. A trio of monitors was arrayed across the quartz island where Julian tracked the day's market trends, with the San Francisco Bay providing a stunning, indifferent panorama through our floor-to-ceiling windows. I would be at the coffee station in my cashmere robe, already mentally shifting into my workday at the lab, while he perched on his minimalist designer stool, his bespoke suit immaculate, platinum cufflinks glinting in the early light. We executed this routine with the practiced efficiency of stage actors who knew their lines perfectly, but had long since lost the emotional motivation behind them. The whole biotech industry is recalibrating, I'd said that morning, trying to justify why my department's budget had been slashed yet again. It's happening across the board. He looked away from his screens, actually making eye contact with me for what felt like the first time in weeks. Certain people, Amelia, find a way to thrive regardless of market turbulence. Others are simply washed away. He then returned his focus to his monitors. It's just a matter of genetics. I stood there, holding the coffee pot, watching as my husband of 5 years reduced my entire professional life to a question of subpar DNA. The oddest part was that I wasn't even shocked. This was just Julian being Julian, seeing the world as a series of spreadsheets and profit and loss statements, assessing human value on the same basis. My grandmother, Eleanor, had passed away that year, leaving me a modest inheritance with a handwritten note. "For your independence, my dear, never for a man." It was only $50,000, but I had used it to fund the maintenance fees for a patent on a predictive modeling algorithm I'd created during my PhD work at Stanford. The patent was registered under my maiden name, Amelia Reed. With the help of my grandmother's estate lawyer, I had set up a shell corporation to hold it, convincing myself it was merely a prudent financial move. Each month, I would transfer the maintenance fees from a separate account Julian had no knowledge of. He oversaw our joint finances with the meticulous control of a man who equated money with ultimate success. But this one asset was mine and mine alone. The venture capital soirees were the public stage for our marriage's flawed power dynamic. About once a month, we'd show up at these opulent events at the St. Regis or the Fairmont, rooms filled with men in near-identical suits talking about near-identical investment strategies, while their wives feigned interest in market fluctuations. I'd occasionally attempt to join in, mentioning new developments in predictive drug trials or applications for protein-folding models, but the topic would always be redirected. "Amelia plays with molecules," Julian would say with that specific, charming smile that only I knew was laced with condescension. "I play with markets." The room would chuckle. They always did. And I would just stand there in a designer dress he had picked out, holding a glass of champagne I didn't want, the silent punchline to a joke told at my expense. Leo, Julian's closest associate, would sometimes feign interest in my research, asking a few follow-up questions about its real-world applications. But Julian would invariably steer the conversation back to his comfort zone: mergers, acquisitions, and the elegant mechanics of venture funding. "My wife is incredibly smart," he would tell people, in the same tone one might use to describe a particularly clever dog. Stanford PhD, you see. But science doesn't exactly keep the lights on in a place like this. This would be followed by another round of knowing laughter from men who equated intelligence with the size of their year-end bonuses. I began to slip away during these gatherings, finding quiet alcoves where I could check my phone for encrypted emails from firms interested in licensing my algorithm. They didn't know the name Amelia Reed yet, but they understood that her algorithm had the potential to transform how pharmaceutical companies approached clinical trials. The talks were still in the early stages, cautious exchanges between my lawyer and theirs, but I could sense something powerful building on the horizon, like the atmospheric pressure shift before a major storm. The evening that everything truly began to unravel was a Tuesday in October. Leo had come over for drinks, relaxing in our living room with its curated art and sweeping bay views. He was talking about the firm's latest star hire, and I saw my husband lean in with a focus I hadn't witnessed since we first started dating. Clara Monroe. Julian savored the name as if it were an exotic dish he was tasting for the first time and had decided he quite enjoyed. That's a name that belongs on a partnership announcement. After Leo left, Julian was effusive, talking endlessly about the value of fresh talent, of hungry new players, of the critical need to nurture the next generation of leaders. He paced our living room with a restless energy I hadn't seen in years, gesturing animatedly as he did when he was genuinely passionate about something. The firm needs people who can read the new landscape, he declared. Someone who speaks the language of modern venture capital. Unlike me, who speaks the language of cellular biology? I asked, attempting to keep my tone light. He stopped pacing and looked at me with an expression I had come to dread, a mixture of pity and disappointment. You know, that's not what I meant. But we both knew that was precisely what he meant. I was the wife who had been suitable while he was climbing the corporate ladder, acceptable when he needed a partner with credentials impressive enough for company functions. But now that he was a senior partner, moving in circles where nine-figure deals were casual afternoon chats, I was starting to appear as what he likely always saw me as, a Phase 1 wife, good enough for the ascent but not for the summit. That night, as I lay in our expansive bed listening to the rhythm of Julian's breathing, I made a firm decision. The patent negotiations would proceed, but with a new sense of urgency. The algorithm was perfected, the market was primed for it, and 3 companies were now circling with significant offers. My grandmother had been right to give me something for my independence. I just hadn't grasped until that moment that my independence might require me to walk away from the life I'd built with a man who thought success in a laboratory was inherently inferior to success in the stock market. Tuesday morning began like any other. Coffee at 7, checking emails by 7:30, in the lab by 8:30. I was analyzing the data from our latest drug trial when my computer chimed at 10:15 a.m. The subject line was intentionally ambiguous: strategic resource reallocation. The email contained 3 paragraphs of corporate jargon about optimizing workflows and sunsetting non-essential programs. The real message was in the final sentence: effective immediately, the predictive analytics division was being sunsetted. My team, our research into accelerated drug development, 8 years of my life's work, all dismissed as non-essential by executives who likely thought a protein was a type of nutrient. Security showed up at 10:17 a.m. Instead of crying, I focused on the absurd task of cramming 8 years of a career into a small cardboard box. Research binders, academic awards, the coffee mug my team had given me that read, "World's Most Tolerable Boss." Each item felt like a tiny farewell to a life I had built, one experiment at a time. My phone buzzed. It was Julian. I typed, "Just got laid off. Mass downsizing." My fingers lingered over the screen, aching to write more, to ask for some kind of reassurance, some sign that my husband would be the partner I desperately needed him to be in that moment. His reply came 30 seconds later. "Busy. Let's talk later." 4 words. That's all my 8-year career was worth. 4 words that felt less like a message from a loving husband and more like an automated email response. The walk to my car felt interminable. I saw other colleagues being escorted out, all of us clutching our cardboard boxes like passes to a club no one wanted to be a part of. Dr. Chen from immunology was weeping silently. Mark from data science kept muttering about his mortgage. We all avoided making eye contact, each trapped in our own private bubble of devastation. I sat in my Subaru in the parking garage for a full hour, unable to bring myself to start the car. My phone rang twice. Both calls were from biotech recruiters who had, with terrifying speed, already heard about the layoffs, like vultures circling a fresh kill. I let both calls go to voicemail. When I finally arrived home, Julian was in our bedroom, choosing a pair of cufflinks from his extensive collection. The tie he was knotting cost more than most people's car payments. He glanced at my reflection in the mirror, his eyes briefly taking in my puffy face and rumpled blouse. "Client dinner at Saison," he said, as if that explained everything. "Japanese investors. Can't be moved." I stood in the doorway, still clutching my termination letter, waiting for him to turn around and truly see me. When he finally did, his expression was one of mild annoyance, as if my personal catastrophe had inconveniently coincided with his important evening. "So," he said, straightening his tie. Biogen finally made the call. "You knew?" I whispered, the words catching in my throat. The whole street knew. "Biotech has been bleeding money for months. Your division was always the first to be on the chopping block. High cost, zero revenue." He stated it as a simple fact, as if he were discussing any other underperforming asset in his portfolio. There was no recognition that this underperforming asset was my life's work, my passion, my identity for nearly a decade. 8 years, Julian. I gave them 8 years. He sighed, the specific sigh he reserved for when I was being overly emotional about what he considered a purely business matter. He then walked over, put his hands on my shoulders, and looked me dead in the eye. "Some people just aren't built for it, Amelia." The words hung in the air, heavy and cold. Not angry, just a statement of fact, like telling me the sky was blue. "Some people are designed for success," he continued, his hands still gripping my shoulders. "Others work their entire lives and never quite manage to break through. There's no shame in understanding your own limitations." He planted a quick, dismissive kiss on my forehead and returned to his cufflinks. "I'll be late. Don't wait up." 2 nights later, I fully understood how Julian intended to frame my new unemployed status. He had invited a group of colleagues over for an impromptu dinner, one of those gatherings he loved to throw to showcase our seemingly perfect life. I spent hours preparing a cioppino from a recipe in one of his approved entertaining cookbooks. "Where's our brilliant scientist tonight?" Leo asked as I brought out the appetizers. "Amelia's currently exploring new opportunities," Julian answered before I could open my mouth. The phrase was smooth and practiced, but his tone implied this was a permanent condition, not a temporary transition. "Actually, I'm considering several options," I began, but Julian cut me off with a wave of his hand. "She's taking some time to recalibrate her career path," he said, smiling at his guests. "Sometimes a setback is really just a chance to adjust your expectations downward." The men around the table nodded thoughtfully, as if Julian had just shared a profound piece of wisdom instead of publicly branding me a failure. I just stood there holding a tray of crostini I'd painstakingly assembled, feeling utterly invisible except as a purveyor of food. "What kind of research were you focused on?" asked a new associate, attempting to be polite. "Predictive modeling for oncology drug trials," I started. "We were developing a platform to—" "Highly technical stuff," Julian interrupted, dismissing it with a flick of his wrist. "Hardly dinner party material. Amy, could you check on the main course?" I retreated to the kitchen, the sound of their conversation shifting seamlessly to market forecasts and IPO strategies. Through the pass-through window, I watched my husband command the room, animated and confident, occasionally gesturing toward the kitchen as he explained how I was adjusting to the new reality. Later that night, long after the guests had departed and Julian was asleep, satisfied with his performance as the magnanimous husband of a suitably diminished wife, I locked myself in the guest bathroom with my phone, the cold marble floor pressed against my legs as I sat, whispering to a senior executive from Genomics Prime. Dr. Reed, your algorithm could be revolutionary for our entire data analysis pipeline, the voice on the other end said. We're prepared to make a very substantial offer. I need absolute and total confidentiality, I whispered, my ears straining for any sound from the master bedroom. The patent is under my maiden name. This cannot be connected to my married identity in any way. Understood. Can we arrange a face-to-face meeting? I thought about my now empty calendar, the days stretching out before me, filled with nothing but the mock job applications Julian expected me to be working on and the social events where I'd be paraded as a cautionary tale. Thursday, 10 a.m., I said. The coffee shop on Valencia Street, not the one near the financial district. As I scheduled more calls with other interested companies, each one conducted in hushed tones from a different locked room in my own home, I felt like a spy operating deep within enemy lines. The only difference was that the enemy was currently sleeping soundly on 1,000-thread count sheets in the next room, dreaming of whatever men like him dream of when they've successfully managed their wives into convenient disappointments. The Thursday morning meeting at the Valencia Street coffee shop went even better than I'd hoped. The representative from Genomics Prime left with a look of awe after I walked him through the algorithm's performance data, and I left knowing a formal offer was just days away. For the first time since being fired, I felt a flicker of hope. That feeling lasted for precisely 9 hours, until I officially met Clara Monroe. The firm's annual gala was at the SFMOMA, one of those charity events where the primary motivation was networking, not philanthropy. I wore a black dress Julian had bought me a couple of years prior, back when he still considered me an asset worth showcasing. He had been agitated all week, constantly checking his phone and rearranging our plans to fit someone else's schedule. I should have seen it coming. She appeared during the cocktail hour, a vision in an emerald green gown that likely cost more than 3 months of my former salary. Everything about her was meticulously crafted for effect. The way the dress clung to her lithe frame, the diamond earrings that sparkled when she laughed, the sheer force of confidence she projected with every move. She navigated the room as if she owned it, and when she saw us, she headed over in a direct, unwavering line. "You must be Amelia." Her handshake was firm, her smile polished. "Julian talks about you all the time." The way she emphasized all the time made it clear his talk wasn't exactly flattering. Her eyes did a quick, efficient scan of me, like an appraiser cataloging assets and liabilities. I could practically see her mental checklist. Mid-30s, unemployed, last season dress, threat level 0. Clara Monroe, she said, though we both knew who she was. "I'm the new analyst Julian has been mentoring. He's been absolutely instrumental in shaping my view on emerging tech markets." She then launched into a detailed analysis of Asian market volatility, speaking with the same passion I used to reserve for discussions about RNA sequencing. Julian watched her, utterly captivated, occasionally chiming in with observations that made her laugh, a laugh that felt both professional and deeply personal. I stood between them, a silent observer holding a glass of champagne, feeling like a piece of well-dressed furniture. Stanford GSB, class of 2022, she mentioned offhandedly when someone inquired about her background. But the real learning happens when you work with someone like Julian. He just sees things no one else does. My husband visibly swelled under her praise. His entire posture shifted, shoulders back, chin lifted, the version of himself he adopted when he was closing a major deal. When another colleague approached our group, Julian placed a hand on the small of Clara's back, guiding her into the conversation. The gesture was fleeting, but I saw the almost imperceptible way she leaned into his touch. In the weeks that followed, Julian's social media became a shrine to his mentorship. Every other day there was a new photo of him and Clara, pointing at a laptop screen, laughing over coffee, deep in discussion in a glass-walled conference room. The comments were always fawning and immediate, mostly from her. Fire emojis accompanied captions like, "This is why you're the best in the business and brilliant insights. So lucky to be learning from the master." Meanwhile, my texts asking when he might be home for dinner were ignored for hours. When a reply finally came, it was always terse. Running late or client issue or just don't wait up. I began stalking her Instagram, searching for definitive proof of what I already knew. Her feed was a carefully curated highlight reel of a life of effortless success. Sunrise workouts at a luxury gym, afternoon meetings in sleek boardrooms, evening cocktails at exclusive spots. Julian began appearing more frequently, always in a context that was just professional enough to be deniable, but just intimate enough to be damning. Thursday, April 15th. I remember the date because it was the day the last of my denial crumbled. Julian had actually come home for dinner, a rarity that month. His phone rang at 10:45 p.m. He answered instantly, his expression shifting to one of grave concern. The Tokyo markets? He was already grabbing his jacket. "No, you're right. We have to get ahead of this. I'll meet you at the office." He kissed my forehead distractedly. Crisis with the Yamamoto deal. Might be an all-nighter. At 2 a.m., wide awake, I called his direct line at the office. It rang and rang, eventually going to voicemail. I tried his cell. It went straight to voicemail. Then I remembered the location sharing app we had set up years ago for a trip abroad and had never bothered to disable. My hands were shaking as I opened it. The little blue dot showed his location at the Four Seasons downtown, not his office building. My stomach dropped. I switched over to Instagram and found Clara's story from an hour before. A single champagne flute held up against a backdrop of city lights, tagged at the Four Seasons, with the caption, "Late Night Strategy Session," followed by a winking emoji. I sat on the cold bathroom floor until the sun came up, phone in hand, watching his location pin remain fixed at the hotel. He came home just after 6 a.m., his shirt untucked, looking exhausted but strangely exhilarated. "Long night," I said from the kitchen, where I was nursing a cup of cold coffee. "Brutal," he replied. "But we saved the deal." He went straight to the shower without looking at me. Saturday morning, my mother showed up at our door unannounced. Diana Reed had a sixth sense for her daughter's suffering. She took one look at my face, the dark circles, the gauntness from a week of not eating, and enveloped me in a hug that made me feel like a child again. "Tell me," she said, leading me to the sofa. I told her everything about Clara, the late nights, the way Julian looked at her as if she were the answer to a question he hadn't realized he was asking. Mom listened patiently, her hand squeezing mine whenever my voice broke. "Some men only realize what they have when it's walking out the door," she said softly when I had finished. "Your father was like that with his first wife. Had no idea what a treasure she was until she was gone and building a new life." "This is different," I protested. "Julian and I built this together." "You built something," she corrected gently. "He just moved in." She stroked my hair, just as she did when I was a little girl. "So what's your plan?" I almost told her then. I almost told her about the patent, the secret meetings, the algorithm, and the life-changing money that would soon make Julian's entire portfolio look like spare change. But I held back. This secret felt too potent, too personal to share, even with my mother. Some defenses are too valuable to lower even for those you love most. "I don't know yet," I said instead, "but I'm working on it." She looked at me, and I saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes. She saw the same quiet determination I'd had when I insisted on pursuing my PhD, even when everyone told me biotech was too volatile. "Good," she said. "Whatever it is you're working on, you call me if you need anything at all." After she left, I sat alone in our silent condo, staring out at the bay as my phone buzzed with another offer from a competing firm. The figure they proposed was astonishing, but I needed to think. That evening, Julian came home earlier than he had in weeks. I should have known something was up. He walked into the living room with the same deliberate calm he used before delivering a major presentation. He sat in the leather armchair he'd bought himself after making senior partner, the one perfectly positioned to frame him against the city's skyline. He crossed his legs, adjusted his cuffs, and looked at me with the detached air he usually reserved for firing, underperforming analysts. "Amelia, we need to talk about our future." The words were measured, clearly rehearsed. He had likely practiced them in his office, maybe even with Clara providing feedback on how to manage his soon-to-be ex-wife, with maximum efficiency and minimum drama. I sat on the sofa opposite him, the large coffee table between us feeling as wide as an ocean. "We've grown in different directions," he began, clasping his hands in that familiar gesture he used when delivering bad news to clients. The man I was 5 years ago needed different things from a partner than the man I am today. "You're a brilliant person, but we're on separate paths now." He spoke for nearly 20 minutes, his gaze fixed on a point just over my shoulder, as if I were already a ghost he was talking past. He used corporate buzzwords like strategic realignment and optimizing individual potential. When he finally mentioned Clara, it was with a careful, calculated neutrality, describing her grasp of quarterly earnings reports and merger strategies as if these were the most vital qualities in a life partner. "She speaks the language of my world," he said, finally looking at me. "You were always more at home in a lab than a boardroom. There's nothing wrong with that, but I need someone who can keep my pace, who understands my world." 5 years of marriage, reduced to a performance review in which I had failed to meet my KPIs. I wanted to tell him about the offers I was fielding, about the algorithm that was about to redefine an entire industry, about the sum of money that would dwarf his precious portfolio. But instead, I just sat there in silence, letting him believe he was the one making the power move. "When?" I asked when he had finally finished. "I think a swift, clean break is best for everyone involved." The next morning, at precisely 8 a.m., the doorbell rang. Preston Thorne, his lawyer, stood in our entryway looking like a bespoke executioner. His briefcase held documents that had obviously been drafted long before Julian's speech. Every asset had been cataloged, every term meticulously crafted to seem generous while ensuring Julian retained everything of substance. "Mrs. Vance?" Thorne said with a smile that was all teeth. "I'm here to go over the dissolution agreement. Mr. Vance has instructed me to be as fair as possible given your current employment status." The slight pause on current made it clear they had factored my joblessness into their strategy. Thorne laid the documents out on our dining room table, the very table where we had hosted holidays and planned a future. "The terms are quite favorable," he explained, his manicured finger tracing the lines of text. "Mr. Vance will retain the condominium, as the mortgage is serviced by his income, the Tesla, as the lease is in his name, the investment portfolios, as they were funded exclusively with his compensation. You will, of course, retain your personal vehicle, clothing, jewelry given as gifts, and your personal effects, my 9-year-old Subaru and whatever I could pack into it." That's what their calculations determined 5 years of my life was worth. Thorne's smile implied I should be grateful. "I'll need my attorney to review this," I said. "Of course, although I should state that Mr. Vance's offer is conditional upon a swift resolution. Any protracted negotiations would require a re-evaluation of the terms." Evelyn Davies' office overlooked the green expanse of Golden Gate Park. She'd made her name dismantling the egos of powerful men who mistook their net worth for their actual worth. She listened to my story without a word, making occasional notes in elegant, handwritten script. "Standard high net worth divorce playbook," she said when I was done. "He wants you to feel grateful for the crumbs while he walks away with the entire bakery." She examined Thorne's paperwork with the focus of a bomb disposal expert. "Legally, the terms are actually solid considering California law and your current financial state." "I want to accept them," I said, and I saw a flicker of surprise on her face, but with one change. "I want an ironclad mutual waiver of all future claims, no matter what." Her pen stilled. She looked at me with the sharp scrutiny that had probably won her hundreds of cases. That's an unusually comprehensive clause. If you inherit a fortune next week or win the lottery, he couldn't touch a cent. But the reverse is also true. If he makes managing partner and triples his income, you get nothing. Perfect, I said. Make it airtight. No loopholes, no exceptions, no matter what happens down the line. Evelyn drummed her fingers on her desk, her mind clearly racing through the implications. You're planning something. I'm planning on moving on, I replied. This clause ensures we both can, completely and irrevocably. She studied my face for another long moment, then nodded. I'll draft language that a bulldozer couldn't get through. But Amelia, once you sign this, that's it. There are no do-overs. I understand. The signing took place in Preston Thorne's conference room 3 days later. The room was all dark mahogany and unread leather-bound books designed to intimidate. Julian sat at the far end of the table in his lucky deal-closing suit, the one he wore when he knew he was winning. A faint trace of Clara's perfume hung in the air around him. Thorne presented the revised agreement with an air of theatrical caution. This mutual waiver clause is quite absolute, Mr. Vance. Are you certain you're comfortable with these terms? Julian barely glanced at it. In his mind, I was a failed scientist with no assets, no prospects, and no future worth considering. If it speeds things up, I'm fine with it. He signed his name with the confident flourish of a man closing a brilliant deal. As he slid the papers across the table to me, I thought of the email on my phone from Genomics Prime, confirming their final offer, a number that exceeded even my most optimistic projections. My hand was perfectly steady as I signed my name, knowing that this single signature was worth more than Julian could possibly comprehend. "Congratulations," Thorne said with false gravity. "You are now officially divorced." Julian stood up, adjusted his cuffs, and looked at me one last time. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Amelia." I almost laughed out loud. I already had. He just didn't know it yet. I walked out of that conference room with divorce papers in my hand and a profound sense of liberation. The elevator ride down from the 40th floor felt like a descent from one life and an ascent into another. By the time I reached the parking garage, I'd already started searching for apartment listings on my phone. The performance of starting over had to begin immediately. The Berkeley apartment I found was ideal for my purpose. It was on the second floor of a brownstone on a quiet, tree-lined street near the university, in a neighborhood filled with graduate students and professors. A used bookstore on the ground floor served mediocre coffee that tasted infinitely better than anything from the high-end machine in the condo. The apartment itself was modest: one bedroom, a small living area, and a kitchen so tiny 2 people couldn't be in it at the same time. The old radiators hissed and clanged, and the windows rattled when a bus went by, but it had character, with exposed brick and original hardwood floors that creaked with history. I paid the first 3 months' rent in cash, telling the landlord, a kindly woman named Mrs. Chen, that I was recently divorced and starting over. She patted my hand and told me about her own divorce 30 years ago. "Freedom, my dear," she said, "tastes so much better than security ever could." My old Subaru looked right at home, parked on the street out front, clearly visible to any passers-by. I made a point of leaving it there most days, moving it just enough to avoid a parking ticket, but always returning it to that same conspicuous spot. The narrative had to be airtight: a divorced woman with limited means, making a fresh start with the scraps her ex-husband had left her. The grocery bags I carried up the stairs were filled with instant ramen, store-brand cereal, and cheap wine with a screw top. Anyone watching, and I was sure someone would be, would see exactly what they expected to see. What they wouldn't see were the documents I had signed earlier that day at my lawyer's office, finalizing the transfer of $98 million through an intricate web of trusts and holding companies that rendered the money essentially invisible until I chose to reveal it. My daily routine became a public performance. Every morning at 8:30, I would walk to a local coffee shop frequented by students and faculty, claim a corner table, and spread out my printed resumes and job postings. I would meticulously highlight various sections with colored pens I had bought specifically for this charade. The level of detail was exhausting but necessary. Another interview? The barista, a grad student named Ben, would ask with genuine sympathy. Third one this week, I'd reply with practiced exhaustion. The market's just brutal right now. I conducted actual phone interviews for positions I had no intention of taking, my voice just loud enough to be overheard by those around me. I discussed modest salary expectations and expressed feigned enthusiasm for entry-level roles far below my qualifications. I made sure to thank recruiters for their time, acknowledging the gap in my employment. On 2 separate occasions, I spotted acquaintances from Julian's circle, friends of friends who would undoubtedly report back on poor Amelia, trying so hard to piece her life back together after her husband traded her in. My communications with James Yoshida, my new wealth manager, were conducted exclusively on encrypted lines at pre-arranged times. His voice was always calm and careful, even through the layers of security. The secondary fund transfers are complete, he would report. The trust structure is fully operational and secure, and the paper trail? Non-existent. As far as any financial inquiry is concerned, you are living on a small amount of savings while actively job hunting. 3 weeks into my new life on a rainy Thursday evening, Patricia Vance, Julian's mother, appeared at my door. She stood in the hallway holding a covered casserole dish, her face etched with a sad smile that suggested this visit had taken days to build up the courage for. "I hope I'm not disturbing you," she said, though we both knew she wouldn't have come if she thought I'd send her away. I invited her in, watching her eyes take in the small space, the secondhand furniture I'd sourced from estate sales, the stark contrast to the sprawling penthouse where she had celebrated so many holidays. She placed the casserole on my tiny kitchen counter and pulled me into a hug that lingered, long enough for both of us to pretend we weren't on the verge of tears. "I raised him to be a better man than this," she whispered into my hair. We sat at my small kitchen table, bought from a student moving back to India, drinking tea from mismatched mugs as the rain lashed against the windows. Patricia looked as though she had aged a decade since the divorce. "I knew about her," she said abruptly. "Clara, I knew before you did." I remained silent, allowing her to unload the burden. He brought her to a luncheon at the club, introduced her as his protégé, but I saw the way they looked at each other, the way she would touch his arm when she laughed. "I should have said something to you. I am so sorry." "It's not your fault," I said, and I meant it. Julian made his own choices. "Are you getting by?" she asked, her gaze sweeping around the apartment again. "Financially, I mean." "I could help." "I'm fine," I assured her. "Really, I have a few promising interviews and my savings will tide me over." She wanted to believe me. She needed to believe that her son hadn't utterly destroyed me. I gave her that comfort, even as my mind drifted to the meeting I had scheduled for the next day at a private room in the Four Seasons, where figures that would astound her would be discussed in quiet, confidential tones. Thomas Hashimoto, one of Yoshida's partners, specialized in managing wealth for what he termed ultra-high net worth individuals. He was waiting in the private dining room when I arrived, with documents spread across the table like a banquet of possibilities. "Ms. Reed," he said, using the name that appeared on all the legal documents, "we need to formulate an investment strategy for your assets. For the next 2 hours, we discussed market diversification, offshore accounts in favorable tax jurisdictions, and complex structures that would generate substantial income while preserving complete anonymity. Every document I signed bore the name Amelia Reed. The name Julian had once suggested sounded too plain for San Francisco society, the name he'd advised me to drop professionally. It was now attached to a fortune larger than his entire firm's annual revenue. Your ex-husband, Hashimoto said carefully, he has no way of tracing these assets back to you. He doesn't even know they exist, I replied. And legally, even if he found out tomorrow, the mutual waiver clause makes any claim impossible. Hashimoto allowed himself a small, professional smile. Then we proceed as planned. Your wealth remains entirely off the grid until you decide otherwise. On my way back to Berkeley that evening, I stopped at a grocery store and bought more instant ramen, making sure the generic paper bag was clearly visible as I walked up the stairs to my apartment. That bag sat on my kitchen counter next to the carefully doctored bank statements I always left out in case of unexpected visitors. 3 months had passed since the divorce, and my performance as the struggling ex-wife was, by all accounts, a masterpiece. That Tuesday morning in late July, I prepared for what I knew would be the beginning of the end of my carefully constructed facade. The annual Bioinnovation Summit was being held at the Moscone Center, and my attendance was a crucial part of my cover story of a desperate job search. I dressed meticulously in my one remaining designer suit, a navy one I had kept because it made me feel confident, and took public transit instead of a car service. Every detail was part of the narrative. The convention floor was electric with the unique energy of a scientific conference, a mix of academic fervor, corporate schmoozing, and the quiet desperation of graduate students hoping to land a job. I registered under my professional name, Dr. Amelia Vance, and began my tour of the recruitment booths, dutifully collecting business cards and brochures I would never use. The whispers began around lunchtime. I was talking to a recruiter from a major pharmaceutical company when I saw her eyes flick past my shoulder, her focus momentarily shifting. Her expression changed, the subtle tightening of facial muscles that happens when someone is trying to connect disparate pieces of information. "Excuse me," she said suddenly, "did you say your maiden name was Reed?" The question seemed innocent, but I felt the shift in the air. Behind her, 2 executives from a rival firm were in a hushed conversation, their eyes darting in my direction. "Yes, why? Oh, no reason. It's just, there's been chatter about a massive acquisition, some game-changing patent in predictive modeling. The seller's name was Reed. Just an odd coincidence." I smiled politely and changed the subject, but the seed had been planted. For the rest of the afternoon, I could feel the weight of a dawning realization spreading through the conference hall. Conversations would halt as I approached. People would whisper as I walked away. By 3 p.m., my phone showed 17 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. That evening, I was sitting in my Berkeley apartment scrolling through Instagram when Clara's story popped up. It was a screenshot of the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office database, with certain details highlighted. The caption read, "Funny how some people demand transparency in a relationship while hiding major assets. The truth always comes out." Integrity, financial honesty. The next few stories were even more direct. Screenshots of California divorce law articles about asset disclosure, a photo of her and Julian at a restaurant with the caption, "Supporting each other through deception and betrayal," and then, the most telling, a picture of the Genomics Prime headquarters with 3 large question mark emojis. She was close. Her network in the venture capital world had clearly been buzzing, connecting the dots between the mysterious Reed patent and Julian's discarded ex-wife. I could almost feel her frustration, suspecting something huge but unable to find concrete proof. On Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang as I was performing my daily ritual at the coffee shop. Leo's name flashed on the screen. I knew this call had been orchestrated, likely with Julian listening in on speakerphone. "Amelia? Hi. Hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." His voice had the forced, unnatural casualness of someone reading from a script. "Leo, this is a surprise. Yeah, well, I've just been thinking about you. With the divorce and the job situation and everything, it must be a tough time." He paused, clearly expecting me to fill the silence with a tale of financial woe. When I didn't, he pressed on. "Look, I know things with Julian ended poorly, but we're still friends, right? If you need anything, financially, I mean, I could probably arrange a small loan or maybe even find a spot for you at one of our portfolio companies. The offer was so transparent it was almost pathetic. This was Julian's reconnaissance mission, an attempt to gauge my financial state and determine if the rumors were just that. Rumors. That's very kind of you, Leo, but I'm managing just fine on my savings. The job market is starting to look up. Savings. His voice hitched almost imperceptibly. That's great. Great. Must be nice to have that buffer. Though I imagine it can't last forever in a city this expensive. I've become quite frugal. There was a long, awkward silence. I could practically hear him scrambling for another way to probe for information. Well, the offer stands. If anything changes, you have my number. I appreciate that, Leo. After he hung up, I stayed at the coffee shop for another hour, maintaining the illusion of normalcy even as my heart hammered against my ribs. The pieces were all falling into place, just as I'd planned. The financial world was connecting the dots, but without official confirmation, it was all just speculation. That evening, I opened my laptop and logged into the Amelia Reed Biosystems email account, which had been dormant since the initial sale. It was time to make the final move. I composed a short, simple email to the head of public relations at Genomics Prime. Dear Ms. Patterson, I hope you are well. As we discussed during our negotiations, I have maintained a low public profile regarding the patent acquisition. However, I believe it is now appropriate to update your press materials to reflect the full name of the patent holder for the sake of accuracy and transparency. Please update all public references from Dr. A. Reed to Dr. Amelia Reed Vance. Thank you for your continued discretion. Best, Dr. Amelia Reed Vance. I hit send and closed the laptop. Within hours, perhaps minutes, the updated information would appear on the Genomics Prime website. Their next press release would include my full name. The connection between the mysterious patent holder and Julian's discarded ex-wife would no longer be a rumor. It would be an undeniable fact. I made myself a cup of tea and sat by my window, watching the students and professors hurry along the street in the warm summer evening. My phone buzzed with another notification from Clara's Instagram, another desperate attempt to solve a puzzle that was about to solve itself. Tomorrow, or the day after, Julian would finally learn the true cost of his assessment of my worth. He would discover that while he had been calculating my limitations, I had been building an empire he never knew existed. The woman he had dismissed as a failure, whose blood he claimed was predisposed to mediocrity, had been sitting on a fortune that dwarfed his entire life's earnings. I thought about his mother, Patricia, and the sadness in her eyes. I thought about Leo and his clumsy fishing expedition. I thought about all the dinner parties where I was the punchline. The truth was about to be revealed, and to my surprise, I felt completely at peace. That peace was short-lived. Thursday evening brought a summer thunderstorm that turned the Berkeley streets into glistening rivers of light and shadow. I was reading a medical journal, keeping up with my field despite my unemployment, when my phone vibrated on the table. Julian's name on the screen felt like a prophecy coming to pass. I let it ring 3 times before I answered, taking a moment to steady my breathing. Amelia. His voice was utterly changed. The confident, commanding tone was gone, replaced by something raw, uncertain, and bordering on desperate. Hello, Julian. The patent. The Genomics Prime deal. It's you. Amelia Reed Vance. There was no point denying it. The press release had gone out that morning. By noon, financial blogs were buzzing with stories about the once mysterious patent holder. By 3 p.m., someone had connected Dr. Amelia Reed Vance to the recently divorced wife of senior partner Julian Vance. Yes. The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the sound of rain against my window and his ragged breathing on the line. $98 million, he said, enunciating each word as if trying to force them to make sense. You had $98 million when we divorced. Number 1, I had a patent when we divorced. The sale was finalized 2 weeks after you signed the papers. That's semantics. You were in negotiations. You knew its value. You sat in that conference room and you let me think." His voice cracked. "You let me believe you had nothing. I let you believe what you had already decided was true, that I was a failure, that my work with molecules, as you put it, was insignificant. This isn't fair. We were married for 5 years. That patent, that work, it was developed during our marriage. I have a claim. You have exactly what you signed for: the condo, the Tesla, the investment accounts, and a mutual waiver clause so absolute your own lawyer called it overprotective. You said you didn't care, as long as it sped things up. Remember?" I could hear him pacing, the muffled sound of his footsteps on what I imagined was the expensive rug in the penthouse that was once our home. Then the sound of a door closing and faint, high-pitched voices. Clara was with him. Of course she was. "We need to discuss this in person," he said, his voice hard again. "I'm coming over. It's almost midnight, Julian. I don't care. We are going to fix this." The line went dead. I sat in my small living room, listening to the storm, and waited. I didn't change out of my pajamas or bother to make myself look presentable. There was a quiet power in meeting him exactly as I was, no longer playing any role. The doorbell rang at 12:17 a.m. Through the peephole, I saw Julian, soaked from the rain despite the short dash from his car. Behind him, just out of direct sight, Clara hovered on the staircase, no doubt positioned as backup. I opened the door but stood my ground, blocking the entrance. He stood in the doorway, dripping water onto the worn hallway floor, clutching a manila folder like a shield. "Can I come in?" "No." He looked genuinely taken aback by the simple, direct refusal. In 5 years, I had rarely denied him anything so unequivocally. "Amelia, please. Be reasonable. We can work this out." He opened the folder, revealing legal documents. "My lawyer drew this up. A post-divorce settlement modification. We split the proceeds from the patent. 50-50. It's more than fair, considering..." "Considering what? That you left me? That you took everything of material value? That you told anyone who would listen that I was genetically predisposed to failure?" His face flushed with either shame or anger, I couldn't tell which. "I was going through things. Clara and I..." "It wasn't how it was supposed to happen. But this isn't about her. This is about what is right." "Right." I repeated the word, the taste of it bitter in my mouth. Was it right when you introduced me at parties as your unemployed wife who was exploring her options? Was it right when you told me I wasn't built for the world you lived in? I didn't mean it like that." He stopped, regrouped, and tried a different tactic. "The condo. I'll give you the condo, the car, everything. You can have it all back. Just share the patent money." I looked at him. A man so powerful just months ago, now reduced to begging on the doorstep of someone he had written off as worthless. Behind him, I saw Clara had crept closer, no longer content to wait in the wings. "The patent was filed before we were married," I stated, my voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "It was maintained using my grandmother's inheritance, money you never knew about because you never bothered to ask. And it was sold after our divorce was legally finalized. You have no claim." "Legal technicalities," he snapped, his voice rising. "You know this is morally wrong. You deceived me. I protected myself. There is a significant difference." That's when Clara finally broke. She shoved past Julian, her expensive heels sinking into my cheap doormat, mascara streaking down her face. "You manipulative witch!" she shrieked, her hand flying up as if to strike me. I caught her wrist, my grip gentle but unyielding. I could feel the tremor of rage in her arm. "He chose you for your ambition," I said quietly, looking her directly in the eye. "I chose silence for my freedom. In the end, we both got exactly what we planned for." She tore her hand away, stumbling back into Julian, who caught her automatically. "You will regret this," she sobbed. "We'll tell everyone what you did." "And what did I do, exactly?" File a patent under my own name? Fund it with my own money? Sell it after my divorce was final? Which part of that story do you think makes me look bad?" Julian pulled Clara back toward the doorway, his face a mask of utter defeat. At the threshold, he turned back one last time. "I did love you once," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "No," I replied softly. "You loved the idea of me. The Stanford PhD who made you look smart. The scientist wife who made you seem sophisticated. But you never actually loved me, Julian. If you had, you would have known I was capable of this." I closed the door on them, listening to their footsteps retreat down the stairs. From my window, I watched them get into his Tesla. Clara was gesturing wildly, her face contorted in anger, while Julian just sat motionless behind the wheel. Eventually, they drove off, the red taillights disappearing into the rain-washed night. I stood alone in my little apartment, surrounded by the props of my feigned poverty, and felt a profound, unshakable peace. I knew that tomorrow would bring angry lawyers, public threats, and social media campaigns designed to shame me. But tonight, in the quiet aftermath, I had won. Not by fighting, but by refusing to apologize for protecting myself. The rain continued to fall, washing the city clean. Sleep was impossible after Julian and Clara left. I sat by the window, watching the storm subside as dawn slowly broke over the East Bay. By morning, a decision had been made. The performance was over. It was time to stop hiding. 3 months later, in October, an invitation arrived on cardstock so thick it felt like a piece of armor. Genomics Prime was hosting its quarterly board meeting, and they wanted me to present the future applications of my algorithm to their directors and key investors. The meeting was in their top-floor conference room with an audience that included some of San Francisco's most influential figures in biotech and finance. I dressed for the occasion in a new suit, a tailored charcoal gray that I had purchased with money I no longer had to conceal. The small Berkeley apartment had been swapped for a spacious townhome in Pacific Heights, a quiet transition I'd made on a Sunday when the streets were empty. The Genomics Prime boardroom was 40 floors up, its panoramic windows turning the city into a living map of ambition and power. As the executives filed in, I recognized several faces from Julian's firm. Richard Thornton, the managing partner who had once patronized me at a dinner party, James Mitchell, who had laughed the loudest at Julian's jokes about my test tubes, and in the back row, attempting to be inconspicuous, was Leo, who had called me weeks before, fishing for information. "Ladies and gentlemen," the CEO began, "it is my distinct privilege to introduce Dr. Amelia Reed Vance, whose pioneering work has positioned Genomics Prime as a leader in genetic medicine. Her algorithm will fundamentally reshape our approach to disease." I stood before them, no longer the dismissed, unemployed wife, and walked them through applications that would not only save lives, but generate profits beyond their wildest projections. I watched Richard Thornton's expression as the financial implications sank in, saw him doing the mental arithmetic of what a $98 million asset meant for my net worth compared to his. "Dr. Reed Vance," Thornton said when I concluded, his voice carefully neutral, "this is truly remarkable. I believe you were previously married to one of our city's senior financial partners." "Previously," I confirmed, meeting his gaze without flinching. "Though I am sure Julian has moved on to other ventures." A thick silence fell over the room. Everyone knew the story by then, how Julian Vance had left his wife for a younger woman just weeks before she was revealed to be a 9-figure patent holder. 2 weeks after that, the Children's Hospital annual fundraiser filled a grand ballroom with the city's medical and financial elite. I was in attendance as a platinum sponsor, my name printed prominently in the event program alongside families who had been philanthropic mainstays for generations. I spotted them before they saw me. Julian and Clara were standing near the silent auction tables. His hand rested on her back with that familiar possessive air. Her engagement ring was modest by the standards of the room, certainly smaller than the one he had given me. He looked older, with more gray at his temples, his shoulders slumped with a weight that hadn't been there before. Whispers trailed them like a shadow. Monumental misjudgment, I overheard someone say. He could have been set for life. She was worth how much? Julian's own colleagues gave him a wide berth, their greetings brief and cool before they moved on to more promising conversations. Our eyes met across the crowded room as I accepted a glass of champagne from a server. In that frozen moment, I saw him take in my appearance. The designer gown, the effortless confidence, the small group of admirers listening as I discussed the new scholarship fund I had just established. I raised my glass to him slightly, a gesture not of mockery, but of simple acknowledgement. We had both made our choices. He was the first to look away, guiding Clara toward the exit. They left before the main course was served. A month later, my mother's 70th birthday filled my Pacific Heights home with family. The house was everything the old condo was not. Warm, inviting, and filled with memories rather than status symbols. My cousins explored the library while their children ran through the garden, and my aunts took over the kitchen, preparing a feast. "I need to tell you all something," I said as we gathered in the dining room, a sanctuary of restored woodwork and garden views. I told them everything. The patent, the secret, the divorce. Some were shocked, others a little hurt that I hadn't confided in them, but my mother just smiled. "To my daughter?" she said, raising her glass. Who knew when to speak and when to be silent? Who built her own foundation instead of relying on someone else's? To Grandma Eleanor, I added, whose gift made it all possible. The scholarship fund I'm creating at Stanford will be in her name, for women pursuing graduate studies in biotechnology. That night, after the last guest had left and the house was quiet, I sat in my study overlooking the lights of the city. The room smelled of old books and leather, a world away from the sterile office in the condo. I took out a piece of my new stationery and began to write. "Julian, you were right about one thing. We spoke different languages. Your language was about acquiring. Mine was about creating. You measured success by the deal. I measured it by the discovery. You saw my work as a liability, a failure. I saw it as the foundation for a future you were incapable of imagining. The fortune you never knew I had wasn't about the money. It was about knowing my own worth when you refused to see it. It was about protecting my future when you tried to dismiss it. And it was about finding a quiet satisfaction in the truth that the best revenge isn't served cold. It's served with impeccable documentation and the patience to let people show you exactly who they are. I don't hate you. In a way, I'm grateful. Your inability to see my value taught me to never again let anyone else define it for me." I folded the letter, sealed it, and placed it in a desk drawer where it would remain forever unsent. Some truths are meant to be understood, not spoken. Outside, San Francisco glittered, a city of dreams and ambitions, full of people trying to prove their worth to others. But in my study, surrounded by the life I had built with patience and precision, I finally understood that the only person whose approval I ever really needed was my own. End of story.